I had the pleasure of meeting Martijn De Geus just now, and I met him and talked to him a few days before, and he's an amazing guy. He's an award-winning Beijing-based Dutch architect who can speak really good Chinese, and he is the co-founder of Maison H, Hanhe Setzi. He has also received a PhD training under Chinese master architect Li Xiaodong. He's also teaching the master's program in Tsinghua University. His design philosophy is inspired by his early experience working 6 years as a zookeeper of gorillas in the Netherlands. So I hope you all are interested, and I would like to invite Mr. Martijn De Geus.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. That's a very Malaysian thing I heard. You have to say good morning and you say good morning back. It's very interesting. I didn't know that. Thank you for the introduction. I'm not so amazing, really. Especially if you ask my wife, she really does not agree with that. I'm quite a regular guy. And actually, maybe that is also something that I would be able to talk a little bit about. Actually, I think it's really great that we have this opportunity here to talk together. I've seen some amazing speakers already from all over the world, and we've had some good talks, and it seems that the topics that we're talking about here actually align quite well. And I had initially thought to title my lecture One World, Two Futures, and actually yesterday the speaker from the UK, Kevin, also mentioned this. So I would like to step on that. My talk maybe is a little bit different since, okay, I'm an architect and I do architecture, but actually what you always see in these talks is only this part of the work we do. It's only kind of the tip of the iceberg. Everybody shows what's the amazing work, the great photos, the perfect things that we've done. But actually underneath that is an entire kind of not so nice looking, very dark, very depressing, very heavy part that supports all that work at the top. It's actually not my lecture, my slide. This is from Wolf Briggs of Kop Himmelblau, and he noticed that. And I would like to talk a little bit more about what's under the architecture that you see every day. So, my name is Martin. You already heard that. What you might not know is I'm representing China today here because I live in China. Yeah, I know, it's interesting, huh? 但是我不是中国人，但是我也可以说一点中文。如果那个，好吧，好吧。I was born in a very small place here in Europe, in Holland, and I went to architecture school there at TU Delft. Then I went to America for a bit over here. I worked there in Los Angeles, which was amazing. Then I went back, worked in Holland a bit, and I got a little bit bored. Because I thought Holland was very small and nothing much was happening. I will talk about that a little bit later. So about 10 years ago, I moved to China. In China, I've been working with and mentored by Professor Li Xiaodong, who I think you all know around here. And I've been in Tsinghua for the past 9 years. First to study my master's, then started teaching and doing my PhD. And in the meantime, I met my wife there and we started our practice. So that was, thank you. Yeah, actually, she should be talking more than me, actually. But she always wants me to talk, which says I talk better. Well, I don't know. What I want to talk about is 3 things today. One is something about how I came where I am now. 2, what are the projects that we do in the office that support that? And 3, a little bit about what we try to teach others. So I would like to think that at the end of the talk, you would have an idea about how you could also help position yourself in this changing world. Because the world is changing. We've all seen these kind of images. There's no more ice left, the climate. We've heard quite a lot about that already. I will not repeat that. But behind this tip of the iceberg, there is a bigger change. Look at this. This is Beijing 20,000 years ago. And it was the cradle of civilization. People think of Africa as the cradle of civilization, but there is also a site in Peking, the Peking Man site, which was another cradle of civilization. It was one of the most fertile areas of the planet. 200 years ago, Beijing had an excellent system of integrating these natural resources with their city planning and architecture. It was a very harmonious system. Today, not so much anymore. It is actually, this was how it was when I arrived in China, terrible. You know, pollution everywhere, traffic everywhere, just terrible, especially coming from Holland. So that's a big change and it's obvious. Then there's a lot of, I like music, I like heavy metal music, and a lot of this music talks about the doomed, this is called the doomed, everything is going to be death, and we're going to be doomed, and there's no more hope for the world, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's a little bit much, I think, because I think there's one world, two futures. And we're kind of at a crossroads now. We could go to the left, and that's kind of where most of the world is heading. I call it the world of ego, of man, of sameness. People like Donald Trump, Boris Johnson, these kind of, bigots. On the right, we could go to a world of where we are more selfless. It's more environmental, holistic, and diverse. Not only men, also women. Not only white men, but also women of color. Maybe gays, lesbians, people of different religions. Because actually, in nature, it's diversity that breeds innovation. It's diversity that breeds survival. It's not sameness. So I think that would be a way to go. I mean, not to say that I have made that step fully yet. I come from a world which is about ego, about man. I'm white. I'm raised in this terrible environment where architects think they're the gods of the world. I used to be like that too. My wife says I'm still like that, but I try to believe I'm not so much like that anymore. So how to start with that? Well, the first part is about this. Our practice is called Hanhe设计. Actually, I'm the He, my wife is the Han, and it's a post-Western practice, as I would like to call it. And that's the changing world as well. It's not just climate, it's the things underneath that shape this change. It's the rise of Asia. And not many people in the West are actually thinking about that. It's really, even in Davos, which was last year, a big, important forum of 4 white American men actually said, yeah, we are not even really knowing, we're not thinking about what we're needing to do, and we're actually not thinking about it. So we're trying to think about what to do. So first of all, we try to be a collaborative practice. Actually, I don't think we're an architecture office. We're not an office where you come in at 9, you check in, you work, you go away. No, we're not an office, we're a collaborative practice. We work with our clients, with our staff, with models, it's like that. Architecture is not a goal, it's the means. It's the means to address this changing world. And for that, I would like to give a little detour of this girl that changed my life, which is, it's not my wife, I'm sorry. Yeah, I always feel sad for her, but it's okay. She's used to it now. But who was it? Actually, I met this girl in my hometown. This is my hometown in Holland. It's very pretty. It's very boring, but very pretty. Not so many people. Her name was Jazi. And this means a wonderful child in her native language. She was not from Apeldoorn. She was actually, her parents were from Africa. And she was born in Apeldoorn, in my hometown. And this is Jazi. She is not human. She's a gorilla. Because I used to work at the zoo, at the local zoo, for about 6 years. And at the day I started working, Jazi was born, which was really amazing. I've never seen, these kind of big animals up close, and there was just a young girl born. And in the time that I was working there, I saw her growing up. And what was amazing about her is that she just explored the world as we see children do. However, her world was totally designed to be explored in her way. Meaning, you can see this is not your average zoo. There's no bars, there's no glass. The animals are in their natural environment. So she went around playing, looking. That's me, that's her father. So he doesn't seem to like me so much, but that's okay. I had the food, so. So every day I was there, well, not every day, I was there kind of half of the week, observing these gorillas. And it's the largest group of gorillas in captivity in the world. And what's interesting is that you see this photo, random photo, they all look at you. They all sit at the edge of the island looking at you. Whereas if you go to any other zoo, you go to the pandas, you go to the gorillas, you just see in the back. Because they don't want to look at you because they don't feel comfortable. And it's similar to, well, I will talk about that. This island that they're on is totally, it's about 10,000 square meter, and is designed in such a way that suits the natural behavior of these gorillas. So that when you go there, you can observe these gorillas in their natural environment, and they're happy with that. So there's certain kind of architectural elements to help with that. There are these kind of dotted elements which you can see through but not go through. Then there's these more solid elements which you cannot see through and not go through. And then there are some kind of height differences in topography to allow for kind of distant exchange. I'll show you. So here is the father in the front, the son in the back. When you're going through puberty, you don't always want to be around your father. Yeah? But sometimes you would like to see what he's doing. So they have the opportunity to go on this hill and have this exchange, but they are not stressed because they need to be together all the time, which I'm sure you know how stressed it is to be forced to be around your father or your mother all the time. Yeah. And then I found that this also works in architecture. So I found this school, which was designed by Dutch architect Herman Hertzberger, and he kind of uses this same way. He doesn't work with the behavior of gorillas, but he works with the behavior of humans. And you can see if you're a teacher, you're a little bit taller, maybe this tall, and you can see this child and that child. But the children cannot, so they feel more private. So I was very happy there working at the zoo because I'd like, you know, this is amazing. You can design for this natural behavior and we can have a much better world. But then I learned that the rest of the world did not really think about it like that. The rest of the world was actually destroying nature to make room for everything that we needed to take from there. So I thought that was a bit alarming. And then I heard about these giant parts of the world that were deforested. You see, this was the projected deforestation from 2010 to 2030. We're kind of halfway now, so we've lost half of the red part of this map, which was already half of what was existing. It happens in Malaysia, it happens in Australia, in South America and Africa. And then I didn't know what to really do about that, but then I heard, as you heard here already several days, that architecture is a big part of this need for resources. So I thought, okay, great. I'm going to study architecture because maybe I want to do more than just working at the zoo. I mean, I loved it, but I thought I really want to do something for the world. So I'm going to study architecture. So I went to supposedly the best architecture school in Europe at the time, which was in Delft, and it was this building, which was terrible. Yeah. And it reminded me of these kind of, zoos, because they're like the worst zoos I'd ever seen. It's just a prison for people. And that was in Holland, this is in Hong Kong. And even on top of that, all these mass production of buildings leads to an immediate decline of the quality of the natural habitat. You can see left is an illustration, but on the right you see this graph. It is the groundwater level in Beijing, which dropped. Oh, sorry, this is the groundwater level on the right, you see, and this is the yearly precipitation. So you can see over the past 50 years in Beijing, the groundwater level has dropped almost 40 meters, which is incredible. We have a city now that needs to get water from Tibet, which is 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 kilometers away, because we have used all the resources there. Then I found another problem. I thought that we were living in a garden, like my gorillas. And the left is the character for garden in Chinese, for the ones that don't know. It's like a walled environment, and in there you have water, you have earth, you have plants. And the right diagram is the same wall, but a person inside, which in Chinese means a prison. So I'll show you this. This is how I thought the world should be. But this is what the world was when I went out to the world. And it was even worse. Inside these concrete boxes, you had actually people in boxes still. And not only like that, you had them everywhere. People in boxes and boxes and boxes. On top of that, you had people getting quite worried about the effect of this change in the natural habitat on the quality of our future generation. This was a very, very famous documentary in China. It's called Under the Dome. It talks about that people are afraid to let their children go out into the real world because it's dangerous. It's polluted, it's dangerous, it's terrible. So at that time I was quite depressed and confused, so I started to work more in art and do some movies and things, and I just didn't know what to do with this. And I thought, you know what? Fuck all this mediocre bullshit. Yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a part of that, not for myself, but also for the children, our children. And what if our children become the prisoners of this environment that we created? I would feel terrible for that. So that's when I started to think about what to do. Well, I was stuck in Delft in this terrible building, but there was an opportunity to have a small, there was a competition when in my second year, so I was 18 years old, and I thought I don't like this terrible concrete and this kind of glass inhumanity. I want to make a building that is alive, is changing, is green, it's sustainable. So I made this little box. I won the competition. I called it BlackBox, but it's more a green box. It was kind of a stupid name back then, which was my first building. And apart from it being good looking, it was the world's largest prefab wooden element building, so 10 by 10 meter buildings. It's just the world's first fully artificially grown green facade. We used all that LVL, CLT that you heard yesterday. This was 13 years ago. And the interesting thing that I was told later, that actually the title of this competition was called Who Comes After Rem Koolhaas? And not to say that I come after Rem Koolhaas, but I do think Rem Koolhaas kind of embodies everything that I was saying before. You know, this kind of strong, white man who's going to tell you how the world should be and how what you do is wrong. So I think, okay, maybe that's a good starting point. You know, maybe we should not be like Rem Koolhaas. So what I try to do there is try to create a building that has a symbiotic relationship with nature. That means it benefits each other, right? So in this situation where underneath here was this terrible concrete building, over here on the top, if you see over here, there was a small lake which was also terribly dilapidated. It was full of algae, no fish in there, but because so many algae were there, I thought probably this water has a lot of nutrients. So I'm going to use these nutrients to put in this building, because the plants in the building will use those nutrients, and then the building will work as a filter to clean the water. And that's why we came up with the green facade. And you can see how that works here. We had a system. It was very difficult at that time. I had to test it in my own room because nobody believed that was possible, etc. You know, the structural engineers from the Department of Engineering in Delft sent a letter to the dean that they thought it was irresponsible that a young guy like me, who did not even graduate, was using wood that had never been used before in Holland to create this building. And I had to come to the dean. He said, Martin, what's going on? I said, well, I don't know. We have had an engineer to go through this, and no problem. So we were able to go ahead, and you can see it was fine. This was when we were planting it, and I really like this contrast. And the thing is, this was right after we planted it in March. This was in June, and then October, so you see it changing. At that time, also many people tried to sue us because there were several companies that were working on a green wall system. You know, famous French guy, Patrick Blanc. There was a Dutch guy called Ton Venhoeven with a company called Copijn. They both tried to sue us because they said, you know, what you're doing is infringing on our patents. But you know, I just used something which was readily available. It was fully used of recycled material. Actually, the whole facade is recycled clothes. Underneath there is wood. So it was a fully carbon neutral building. And rather than taking away from nature, it actually increased the amount of nature that was on the site. That's why we use a cube. It's a 5 times increase of the green area on site. So this was me at the opening. I was a little bit younger still. You can see here we had this big facade as well, it was really great because I was, at the opening, I was, I think, 18 or 19, and this is my brother, and here's me. So I could party in my own building, and that was really great because it was kind of a multi-purpose use building. Also, around the world, people quite liked it. It was published in all kinds of magazines. I was the youngest person ever published in the A+U magazine. They didn't believe me either when they called me, Martin, I think your birthday is wrong. I said, no, it's 1986, it's correct. Oh. So that really gave me the idea that I could do something with architecture. And I found that later, this speech by Philip Johnson, when he accepted the world's first Pritzker Prize, it's such a thrill to see that you can carry a design through a building for people other than oneself. A building for, so that you can rejoice together over its creation. Because a building is not done by one architect, not by me. There were hundreds of people involved, and I really liked that about architecture. So this was this little cube that we did. You can see it has green roof, etc. Has some windows. So great. And I was thinking, now I found a mission in life and a purpose, and I'm going to do this. But then it was not so smooth because this building burned down, the other building, first of all. And that was interesting because to me, this was the newspaper at the time, and my building survived. So I thought, wow, that must be a sign maybe, that there's hope for the world, Great. Nobody got hurt while the building was burned down, otherwise, but it's still so. However, because there was because of the building burning down, they had to cordon off the whole area, so nobody was allowed to use my building anymore. So it became a little bit dilapidated in itself, up to a point that somebody set it on fire with a Molotov cocktail. I mean, ridiculous. And it was actually the second building that night that this guy set on fire. So I was really so disappointed. And when I was 21, I was not in Holland at that time. I was 21, I had seen this building that was born and created, and it was alive, and then it was already death. I mean, terrible. So I didn't know what to do anymore. Yeah, I had to really think about this. It's amazing, that they can sit like that. You don't think about that. This Makula, he's very interesting. So I started to think, and I felt really disillusioned. So I think this would be my lesson for you. If the first lesson is that the world is changing, my second lesson for you would be that you need some time to think when you're disillusioned. Don't worry, just take some time, reflect. I called this period this kind of urban solitude. I created a kind of tomb for myself at the time. This was my house. I had some nature inside, but it was mostly white. And it was almost living a bit like a monk. I liked to play guitar, so I did that. And then I started to think what we need in the world then. If architecture is so fragile and it can just disappear, maybe I need something behind the architecture that I could work with. So I called this a vision. I started an office called Vision Included. And now you might say, yeah, but everybody has a vision, and I don't think so. I think contemporary architecture practices lack a coherent strategic approach that considers these global changes within their design discourse. Remember, this was 12 years ago. So I looked up what does the word vision mean. It means a mental image of what the future will or could be like. Not one project, not one material, no, a comprehensive image of what the future will or could be like. Okay, well, I started to do that. So I started to think as an architect, as a practice, what could you do? First of all, I think we should have a proactive, socially responsible entrepreneurship, meaning the company I have, the company I'm a part of, is also representative of what I preach in my work, in my projects, to my clients. How to do that? I don't know. I thought the best way to do that would just to change the world. I was Dutch, so we think we can change the world. It was not so easy, I found. So I did a lot of thinking. I really spent maybe 2 years thinking about these problems. And I realized I could not do that on my own. And I started to make a magazine on my table. Started to make mood boards. You see, it's very dark and doom-like. Then I started to make some studies for projects, started to do some competitions. It was mostly just for fun. And then I started to think maybe we should not be about me. Maybe we should start a kind of multidisciplinary workshop with people from all disciplines to think about how to handle this. And we did. After that, so these people, these were in the basement of my house. And these were just friends who were studying at the time. And we started with this idea that architecture could be an expression of the world. So if this is one person, these are all the types of resources one person uses: emotions, natural resources, and physical resources. And we checked for one person how much of these resources we need and how this processing of resources goes, how we go from natural to processed to manufactured to waste. And this was a terrible realization, because we find that for one house equivalent, this is one house, you need this cube of space to accommodate that. Rather than saying we need 5 worlds, I think this is quite clear. And there was a competition in Amsterdam at the time to celebrate 400 years of Amsterdam and how we were not using slavery and colonization anymore to get our resources from around the world, which was great, of course. These were all the Dutch forts around the world around 400 years ago. And that's, you can see Malaysia as well represented, Indonesia, everywhere. And we used wood, people, etc. And we think we don't do that anymore. It's so not true. We're still doing that. Still, resources from around the world end up in particular countries which are better dispositioned in terms of infrastructure, in terms of wealth, etc. So I thought, I don't agree with your celebration. I'm going to show you. They wanted some sustainable housing area. I said, I will show you that you can do one house in that area, and you need that whole cube to actually be able to have that house if you really want to celebrate that. So I didn't win, but I got an honorable mention, so that was okay. I will show you later. But throughout all of that, I decided some things. First of all, we are no doomdenkers. And now this is a word in Dutch. It means, I don't think we're doomed. Actually, I think we can be optimistic if we embrace kind of idealism. We think about urban ecologies and we work with some vision. So then I started to look at what we should go towards. What's this idea of the future? And I found that many architects like to think about the future. For instance, this guy, Le Corbusier, he's probably one of the most well-known visionaries of the last century. And he talked about vers une architecture, which means towards an architecture. Not a new architecture, just an architecture. I thought, no, we should not go towards architecture. We have a lot already. We should go towards habitat, integration of man and environment, just like the gorillas. And I thought maybe we should not think about how the context is affecting our buildings. We should think about what we can do to affect our surroundings. So I made a manifesto. You have to do that as an architect, I found, so I did that. And then I thought, you know what, I'm going to go to China. Because Holland is too small and too... Dutch people feel too entitled. They think they know everything already. They think we're so good, we don't use colonization anymore. We're so good, we're so sustainable. No, actually not, but they did not want to hear that. So I thought to go to China. It's more obvious that it's not going well there at the time. Yeah. So this was Beijing in 2010. Oh, it was really terrible. But of course, it was also very stimulating. It was terrible that it was like that, but I thought I can do something there. And when I went around in China, I thought it was really amazing that I found these buildings and environments that were exactly like what I thought architecture should be like. For instance, this building, I don't know if you know it. It's in Ningbo. It's called the 田一个, and it is a library. I thought it's amazing. You can have a library without books. It's so strange. And it's not a temple to celebrate the books. No, it's a place where you can wander and have conversations to gain knowledge. I thought, well, that's really nice. And I found more of these paintings and impressions, whether they were really built or from the past. I learned that in China, people and buildings used to be a part of nature. And then I thought, okay, if we can start with that, maybe I can try that for myself first. At that time, I had just met my wife, and I had no money. I still have no money, but at that time, I was really broke. So we could only kind of live in this area. Yeah, which, coming from Holland, you remember my hometown, you know. So, but I thought maybe we can try to make a little bit of something. So the first kind of project we did was just to make a small oasis there and kind of try to live that life that we believed in. And you can see in the back all those terrible houses. We had our small little oasis. And we still have that. We have a small practice now together, and this is our home. And I will show you a little bit about that. What's truly special, I think, about this location is that it's a really historic yard in a very modern city. This particular courtyard can be found in maps from the Qing dynasty, for instance. You can go back hundreds of years and they have already drawn this yard here, and it's kind of special to be in a city with so much history and be kind of part of shaping that history again. Well, I think it's important that you have an environment that shows how you want others to live. And it can only work if you make it work for yourself. I think by having an environment like we have here, it's a piece of nature in the city, a calm oasis in the urban jungle. I think by showing that it's possible, it gives others a trust in us, in a way. Actually, we found by combining the house and work in one environment, it really becomes a way of living. So by combining these two, it becomes almost like a living laboratory. It's like a project in its own. In the winter, you have longer nights, and in the summer, you have shorter nights. You kind of live with the seasons. And that brings a very different perspective on life. For us, it's not really a difference between what we think and what we do. There's no theory or practice. It's one life. It's a lifestyle. It's a holistic. It's like a natural way of living. It's like a natural way of being, I would say. So, in order for us to kind of be able to create the work that we believe in, we first try to make the conditions that would allow for that. So we have this little courtyard, where on the one side we have the office, the other side we have the home. It's in the middle of Beijing, it's not on the outskirts, it's really at the center. And it's kind of where we hide away from the world. And as we said, I don't work alone. As you see in the video, we have a whole team that works together, including our dog. He's our chief happiness officer. He's called Bobo. Yeah, he's really cute. We have some turtles. We have birds. We like to work and eat together. And I think that is actually really maybe even more important than the work we do, is the way we work with people. And our third lesson, my third lesson would be, if you have established this life for yourself, if you believe in that, then we can help others to live and learn and work in these kind of environments. So I will show you a little bit of some of the work that we did. Because when I moved to China initially, I went also to supposedly the best university in China, Tsinghua, which also looked exactly like that supposedly best university in Holland, with some terrible concrete building. Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, then so I have to watch out, my colleague also in the room, so maybe later he will This was the architecture school. Anyway, one of the things, rather than making new buildings, we can also think about reusing existing buildings. So I found that this traditional way of making buildings and the traditional way of teaching in China is like we do here now. The teacher talks, the student listens. But I found in Holland, people don't like to learn in that way. They like to learn together. Kids like to sit together and be naughty and go with each other as in this kind of way. So when I first came to China, I was like, oh my God, I don't want to end up in this terrible kind of learning factory again. So there was a small competition, which we also won, to change this interior, a part of the interior of the school. And we removed all the dead corridors, and we added these kind of objects where people could move onto and inhabit. So this was how it was before. I thought it's like a James Bond movie, kind of Russian prison style. And then we got rid of all of that. And then you can see, 1, 2, we put this thing there, and then it was like that. And this is how it is being used today. I like that people can really inhabit it. And we have created places to sleep, to rest. Boys and girls can be together. That you can kind of hide away from the people at the bottom. It can be used multi-purposefully for lectures. You can open and change everything. Walls can move, etc. And you can see we use every part of the space, up and under, etc. Half of the school was really terrified at us doing it in this way because they were like, come on, Chinese students should not be comfortable. They should learn, study. And I said, come on, but you need to be comfortable and able to learn and study. So we put these little cushions everywhere, and by now people quite like it. It is open plan office. And they like it so much they sleep there also, which was one of the intended effects, of course. We try to do that in places where people work and where people live, and private places and public places. So this is a villa, for instance, where it's currently under construction in Beijing. Also in Beijing, in the middle of Beijing. Nobody would think that you could have this in the middle of Beijing, but you can. And you can see it's also a statement that not all the houses should be the same, or need to be the same, or need to be enclosed boxes. So at any typical building, any villa around the world is kind of a big box, and it occupies all of the land. Now, we made a floating box that leaves the nature untouched. You can see it here. But the client wanted a 1,500 square meter house, so that didn't work. So we went underground. You see, this is the ground level. And we created another floor area here, and there, and there. But we did it in such a way that the light, oh, where's my pen? The light can go in all the way at the bottom. And all the area that we took up from the nature, like this part, we put back. Here, a vertical garden. Here, a courtyard garden. Here's a garden. There's a garden. A roof garden. And you can look at the trees. So it's really a house that is kind of in nature. The light comes in through the courtyard. We used some traditional typologies. And we used shading and passive means to minimize solar gain. For instance, here, so this is an operable mesh facade, so you can close when it gets too hot. Here's a cantilever that takes away the sun in the summer, but in the winter lets the light go in fully. There's water, there's trees, the water has a skylight. So it's a very, very diverse and inclusive kind of living. And the client has no TVs because he has so many gardens. Well, we started building that also. I think it's really important that I also show you that these things that we talk about are actually possible. And we are working on doing that. But it's not easy. Look at the conditions. In Holland, we would be totally scared seeing this kind of building site because it looks so terrible. But so it requires a lot of effort to get all these workers together and the contractors together to use local type of building skills to make this kind of intricate architecture. Yeah. You see how messy and dirty and unsafe it is. But it's okay. We go through that, and we are building it. We are with our client here in the corner, and our contractor, who is doing a great job. This is the most important, actually. Yeah. This is my wife. She does not look very happy. Let's see. So that can also be done for an environment you work in, for instance. And what we do, this was a client that asked us to look at the way his company was working in the same way that I looked at the gorillas. So I went in and observed all their workers, and you can see this was a meeting. This was the main meeting of the day. Nobody is actually even in the meeting room. You know, they're all on the corridor because there's not enough space to go in, and when they go in, they feel threatened because it's too close, these kind of things. So we worked with them and with our staff to make these kind of different places and totally change their office environment. And the interesting thing, this was originally designed for Microsoft because this is how American companies work, you know, closed cubicles. But it's not the future. So you need to have a kind of difference between public and private spaces, even at the workplace. You need personal desk space. You need places where you can mingle a little bit and where you can have focused meetings. So that's what we did. We made this ping pong valley, for instance, where you can work and relax, but you can also hang out and meet. We made these environments where you can, if you choose to, you can go. If you don't want to, you can not be seen. We made all these kind of pocket spaces. We made furniture that can move and change according to the activities of the day. And at one time we came back and I found, look, now they're having a meeting, and these people having a meeting over here, they're over there, and they're in the back. And that's what you want, because you would want to have informal types of meetings when there's exchange. So we went on with that. There was another client. This is China's largest private developer. Vanke asked us to do their renovation of their headquarters, and we did kind of the same way. We went from the strict cubicles to this kind of multi-level public space. We use pantries and tables where you can have informal interactions. Again, we also tried to do reuse of existing buildings. This was a building that was actually 3 buildings. We removed, again, all the walls, put in some new elements, put in some nature, and created a kind of going around. So all of a sudden you can dine and live and sit like you would be at the outside, but now you're inside, and you can have a date with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, but you can kind of still feel comfortable looking out. So if date doesn't go well, you can, yeah, it's important, you know. Also, yes, I like to make beautiful things, of course. Material is nice, but it's always about how that element works in the space. It's the same for nature. I like nature, but it needs to have a contribution to the space, not a decoration. So here we use this bamboo to create a kind of central forest so people don't feel so trapped. I can show you a little bit about that here. It's kind of like MC Escher meets the Chinese garden, in a way. You know, this is kind of a weird journey that it seems never ending. I think it's very good to have such a space or journey inside a city that is so predetermined. Everything is fixed in this city, and this creates an environment where you can explore, where you can see things, where you can discover things. We also do some important projects. We worked on this for the Beijing Olympics. I want to show you a little bit about that, because this is for the Beijing Winter Olympics, Olympic Museum. And you see, this is exactly what I said, this future of superimposing, of a man versus nature, man over nature. And what we try to do is, I use one of the diagrams of my old boss at MVRDV, kind of create a public route throughout the building that connects the building with the landscape. So we made a museum that kind of mimics the shape of the mountains in a way, but actually takes those mountains inside and takes the landscape up, so people can go in like that. They can go in from the side. They can actually go from the mountain into the building. There's a kind of a center. So we try to make a building that merges the environment with the building. Of course, also we needed to make it red at some point. It's in China. But most importantly, it's a building that from each step gives a natural open flow to the people around there. And at the back, yeah, let's go next one. At the back, it is a very informal openness. See, the front is a very kind of formal openness towards the city. At the back, you can see that the ski lift is going into the building. You can go from here, you go up, and you can ski back right into here because it's at the base of the mountain. And we use this building as a connector from the mountain to the water to the rest of the city. Exactly like that first diagram I showed you. Not about how the context influences just my building. No, how can the building do something to the environment? How can it help support the environment? So imagine you come here from the ski slope at the top, and you go through, and you go and you end up in the building. And then from the building you can go down into the plaza, into the city. It's like that. Right to there. So it's a kind of a zigzag kind of building. I'll show you a little bit. I want to end with this. Because also you need to, I think it's important that we learn how to teach others. Because I can do what I do, and that's why I'm sorry I don't spend so much time on the projects, because it's not so important. In a way, it's important about why we do them and what is inside us that makes it possible. And that's the same. So when I told you it was a terrible building, but this is one of the best things about being in China is being in Tsinghua. It's a kind of a think tank through which you can lever social change in China. That's amazing. We don't have such kind of institutes in the West. The school's academic mission is an integral part of China's urban development. That means what we think about there will be done, just like that, which is amazing. Of course, it's the top school of Asia, it's the leading university in China, but that's not so relevant. What's more important is that in China, 95% of people believe that climate change is caused by human interventions. Farmers believe that. Farmers in the far remote regions of Tibet, they see that every day. So there's a big incentive to do something about that. Our dean believes that the combination of Design Institute of Architecture together with the study and research could really integrate these challenges towards a better future. So in a way, it is getting rid of this ego architecture, this kind of Rem Koolhaas CCTV, and it is more towards a contribution to the development of people. There's other teachers in the school, which are, of course, one of the best resources. There's Professor Li Xiaodong. He's also practicing what he teaches. This is his Li Yuan library. I worked on that when I first came to China. It's a library in rural Beijing. It's very famous around the world at the moment. Then the great thing is that we can also do work with our students. So I want to show you a little bit about that. This is a project I did with my students 2 years ago. And this is Xiaodong.
Since 2008, we have been quietly developing our English master program as an international platform inside Tsinghua University. This program provides an opportunity for foreign students to be part of China's future and also enable our school to be inspired by fresh energies from outside.
Our school is located right in the heart of China, Beijing. And now we'd like to show you what this enables us to do. The past 30 years, China has set up a model of urbanization for 1.3 billion people. And now is the fastest developing stage in the
You know
history of
George,
the
I
country.
think.
The experience of what is happening here is very exciting, especially for the architectural profession.
We connect with the world and become the center of a new type of global network. And this is how we do it. We start by learning from built examples to thoroughly understand the local context. Part of the education program is visiting the Li Yuan Library, a rural library which is located just outside of Beijing.
By experiencing built examples, students are able to better understand architecture in a real sense, so you can feel the touch of how a project can be realized from theory to reality. We see the program as a physical place for a global hub. It follows in the school's tradition of integrating a care for regional conditions with a global perspective.
We
we have this hands-on project for our students as part of our program, so that students can join the process of design and construction at the same time.
When students deal with hands-on issues, they can understand architecture from the point of view of a grounded built reality, which complements what they learn in the studio.
For this project, we gather everyone's idea from the proposal and put it into part of our design. It's very interesting to deal with actual contractor, and it's very fulfilling to see our design built in the end. The local community here seems to enjoy using the space as well.
And this part of the exercise, I think, is also very critical for architectural education, so that students can experience seeing a project through from paper to actual construction. That's it. We are also very linked with Chinese government, Tsinghua. This is Premier Li Xiaodong visiting. I'm in the corner at the bottom. It is this total kind of connection between what you think, what you do, and that can allow for change. So I'm also going to skip this part, but about the current project we're doing with our students for villages around Beijing. That is relevant. Yeah, but this is what I want to say something about, because I showed you the zoo in the beginning, and that zoo was a very interesting zoo. It has people over here and monkeys in the same space. There is no difference. And this zoo is at the moment the most biodiverse natural oasis in a very urbanized area, whereas 100 years ago it was just sand. And what we can do, we were asked by the zoo 2 years ago to start thinking about what zoos mean for the world, and to think with them, to think about what they could do. Because you see, 100 years ago, animals were in cages, and currently zoos are very comfortable, whereas 100 years ago, the animals that we ate were very comfortable, but now they are in cages. The effect that people have on nature, this is all the people development is going up. All the natural development, we did a lot of research, goes down. Biodiversity goes down. Forest rate goes down. Amount of gorillas goes down. So we wanted to help this zoo to be a haven for natural diversity, to conclude our mission in the world. It will be the world's largest insect hotel. You know, rather than climate change, the loss of insects is more imminent threat to human survival than the rise of seawater level. By the year 2050, we could have lost our entire bee population because we're killing them with monocultural development, pesticides, etc. So we do something about that. We make the world's largest, it will be the Guinness World Record largest insect hotel. We use types of landscape to embed program in the site. I don't know what's going on. This is a restaurant, for instance, and monkeys can look at people rather than people looking at monkeys. It uses this closeness. It uses circular building, natural building, and that's in China, but also in Holland, as you see. This is very dark. It's also very dark. I want to show you, not this one, because we do all that. Okay, yeah. We also put a gorilla on a building. I'll skip that part. It was fun. But I want to end with this one. Because in the 1970s, this was a very famous cover of Italian magazine Casabella, and this gorilla was seen as this ego, as this Donald Trump alpha man that's gonna destroy the world. But actually, gorillas, first of all, are vegetarians. Yeah, they don't eat animals, and they don't do this. They do that, not this. And they're very kind and friendly. So now the Dutch newspaper did an interview with me recently, and they put this gorilla together with my building on the cover of the newspaper. And I thought it was nice because you can see exactly what we don't need and really what we do need. And I thought that was quite a good skill. And if I compare that with these two futures, to conclude, this future one left a project I did while working at MVRDV, which is this total massive concrete thing for a kind of rich, affluent middle class in India next to a giant slum, whereas on the right, a project I did with Xiaodong in Ningbo, which is part of this valley. On the left is actually the design of that cube that I showed you with the little house on the top, and then this is all the area we need to survive. Whereas on the right, it's more of a subtle kind of small intervention to show the possibility rather than to show how terrible things are. And maybe that is what we should also learn. In the West, there's a theory that says true architecture is an object. You know, it's a kind of holy building. But what about nature? Maybe that should be sacred, rather than the buildings that we put on top of it. So the 6 lessons that I've talked about today, the conclusion is, tomorrow is not me, tomorrow is you. First of all, the world is changing. I showed you in many ways. We have all talked about that. 2, you need to take time to think about this. What does that change mean to you personally? Xiaodong likes to call this reflexive regionalism. These changes around the world, what do they do to you at that place at that time? Choose to create your own life. That's where you start. A better world starts with you is a famous TV commercial we used to have in Holland. Help other people live this life through the work you do, through the way you live. Teach others. Very important. If you know how to do something, help other people also know that. And then act local, but think global. That's it. Thank you very much. If any questions, let me know.